The cold metal corridors of Nexus Outpost glinted under emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Cadet Arya Vale's enhanced senses picked up every subtle change in the environment. The slight temperature drop near the ventilation shafts, the barely perceptible vibration of distant machinery, and most importantly, the unfamiliar scent that shouldn't exist in this sterile environment. Arya flexed her fingers, feeling the bone claws beneath her skin stir restlessly. As a Gen 2 recruit, she represented humanity's latest attempt to create the perfect soldier: heightened senses, reinforced skeleton, and natural weapons that could deploy at will. The modifications had cost her a normal life back on Earth, but they'd earned her a place at this secretive research station tucked away in the asteroid belt, humanity's farthest military outpost. Sector 7 lockdown initiated, announced the station's AI in its emotionless voice. Unknown biological entity detected. All personnel maintain position. Security teams to intercept. But Arya wasn't security. Not officially. She was still classified as a cadet, despite 2 years of intensive combat training. Her current assignment was supposed to be simple observation of laboratory protocols, not dealing with whatever had triggered the alarms. Still, her enhanced hearing caught the rapid heartbeats of terrified researchers several corridors away, and something else, something with a heartbeat unlike anything human. Her communicator buzzed. "Vale, report." Lieutenant Rourke's stern voice filled her ear. "You're closest to the breach point." "Sir, I'm tracking an unknown entity near Research Lab Delta," she responded, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Permission to investigate?" A pause. "Granted, but observe only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. We need information, not heroics." "Understood, sir." Arya moved silently down the corridor, her modified muscles allowing her to progress with preternatural stealth. The emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing crimson, creating disorienting patterns of light and shadow. The scent grew stronger, something musky, primal, with complex chemical undertones that suggested advanced biochemistry. As she rounded the corner toward Lab Delta, she saw it. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a sleek exoskeleton that reflected the emergency lights like polished obsidian. Its limbs were long and articulated with too many joints, ending in appendages that seemed capable of functioning as both hands and weapons. What might have been its head swiveled in her direction, revealing no eyes that she could discern, but sensory organs that pulsed with bioluminescence. This was an apex predator, GenCore's most advanced and secretive bioweapon project. Arya had only heard whispers about these creatures, hyper-evolved hunters combining the most lethal attributes from Earth's predatory species with artificial enhancements. The rumors claimed they possessed intelligence rivaling humans, but were programmed for absolute loyalty to their handlers. This one, however, was clearly operating without a handler. The creature's head tilted, studying her. Then it did something unexpected. It sniffed the air deliberately, drawing in her scent. Arya felt exposed, vulnerable. Her Gen 2 modifications gave her certain advantages, but she knew she was outmatched. The predator was several generations ahead in the evolutionary arms race. Its reaction was immediate and bizarre. Upon sampling her scent, the creature's posture changed. Its limbs stiffened, and then, with theatrical deliberateness, it collapsed to the floor and lay motionless. Arya blinked in confusion. Had it suffered some kind of system failure? Was this a trap? She maintained her distance, circling cautiously to get a better view without approaching. "Vale, report status." Rourke's voice crackled in her ear. "Sir, I've encountered the entity. It appears to be an Apex-class bioweapon. It detected me. Then," she hesitated, "it appears to have deactivated itself, or it's simulating death." "Playing dead," Rourke sounded incredulous. "These aren't raccoons. Cadet. Apex units don't fear confrontation. With respect, sir, that's exactly what it's doing. It sniffed my blood and then dropped to the floor. No visible injuries. Vital signs still active but minimized. Silence stretched over the comm. Then, maintain visual contact but do not approach. A containment team is en route. If it moves, fall back immediately. Yes, sir. Arya kept her position, senses straining to detect any change in the creature. Minutes passed in tense silence. The predator remained motionless, though Arya could detect the faint rhythm of its life processes. Slowed, but definitely active. It was conscious and waiting. But for what? A faint mechanical sound from above caught her attention. Looking up, she noticed the ventilation grate directly over the prone predator was loose. As she watched, it shifted slightly. "Lieutenant, the ventilation system," she began, but it was too late. The grate crashed down, and a second apex predator dropped into the corridor with fluid grace. Unlike the first, this one was in motion immediately, leaping toward the nearest lab entrance. The original predator remained motionless, committed to its ruse even as its companion fled. "Second entity confirmed," Arya shouted into her comm. "Moving to intercept." She sprinted after the active predator, bone claws extending from her fingertips with a painful but familiar sensation. The creature moved with uncanny speed, but Arya's Gen 2 enhancements allowed her to keep pace. It was heading directly for the station's central laboratory, where the most sensitive research was conducted. As she ran, Arya noticed something strange about the second predator's movement pattern. It wasn't trying to attack or evade. It was deliberately drawing her away from the first creature. This was coordinated behavior. They were working together. "It's a diversion," she realized aloud. "Sir, they're operating as a unit." No response came from her communicator. Looking down, she saw the device's display flickering with interference. Something was jamming communications. She had to make a decision: continue pursuing the second predator, or return to monitor the first. Her instincts told her the motionless one posed the greater threat. Its stillness concealed purpose, not defeat. Arya doubled back, moving as silently as her enhanced physiology allowed. When she reached the spot where the first predator had fallen, she found nothing but empty floor. The creature had vanished. A chill ran down her spine. They had orchestrated this. One creates a diversion, while the other feigns harmlessness, then moves when unobserved. These weren't mindless weapons. They were tactical thinkers. Now, she had lost track of both targets and had no way to communicate with command. Standard protocol dictated she should return to the nearest security station. But something told her time was critical. Whatever these creatures wanted, they were moving with purpose. Arya closed her eyes, focusing on her enhanced senses. The recycled air of the station carried thousands of chemical signatures, but she concentrated on isolating the unique scent of the apex predators. There, a trace leading toward the station's lower levels. Following the scent trail, Arya descended through rarely used maintenance shafts. The emergency lighting grew sparser here, leaving stretches of shadow between pools of crimson illumination. The air grew colder as she approached the station's cooling systems. The scent grew stronger near a heavy pressure door marked Thermal Regulation Chamber. Beyond this point lay the massive cooling arrays that prevented the station's research equipment from overheating. It was a maze of machinery and circulating coolant, a perfect hiding place. As she reached for the door controls, Arya hesitated. Entering alone, without backup or communications, violated every protocol. But waiting might mean losing the only chance to understand what these creatures were planning. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of both predators. They were inside, together. Arya stepped through, claws fully extended. The chamber was vast, filled with towering cooling units that created a labyrinth of narrow pathways. Pipes ran overhead, carrying coolant throughout the station. The temperature was near freezing, and Arya's breath formed visible clouds in the air. She moved cautiously between the units, following the freshest scent trail. The predators had passed through recently. But where were they now? The background hum of machinery masked any sounds they might be making. A soft click from above was her only warning. Arya dove forward as one of the predators dropped from an overhead pipe, landing exactly where she had been standing. Its movements were no longer languid. It attacked with explosive speed, slashing at her with limbs that seemed to elongate and sharpen at will. Arya rolled to her feet, facing the creature. It was the one that had played dead earlier. She recognized the pattern of its exoskeleton. But now, it moved with lethal purpose, circling her with predatory focus. "What do you want?" she asked, though she didn't expect it to understand or respond. The predator tilted its head, sensory organs pulsing. Then, to her shock, it made a series of clicking sounds that seemed almost like an attempt at communication. Before she could process this, movement behind her triggered her reflexes. She spun to find the second predator, approaching from another direction. They were coordinating again, trying to trap her between them. Arya backed toward the nearest wall, keeping both creatures in view. "Lieutenant Rourke," she spoke into her dead communicator, out of habit. "If you can hear this, I need immediate backup in the cooling chamber." The first predator made another series of clicks, and both creatures momentarily paused their advance. They seemed to be reassessing her. The lead predator's sensory organs pulsed in patterns that suggested internal processing. It was thinking, analyzing. Then, it did something astonishing. It extended one limb and used a claw-like appendage to scratch a symbol on the frost-covered floor. A crude, but unmistakable drawing of the station's layout, with an X marking a specific location. Arya stared in disbelief. "You're intelligent, fully sentient." The predator made no response, but its companion moved closer to the marked spot on the impromptu map and added another mark, this one resembling a DNA helix. "The genetics lab," Arya realized. "You're after something in the genetics lab." The first predator's sensory organs pulsed rapidly, and it made a motion that seemed almost like a nod. Then, without warning, it lunged toward her. Arya reacted instinctively, slashing with her bone claws. She caught the creature across what passed for its shoulder, drawing a fluid that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. The predator recoiled, making a high-pitched sound that might have been pain. The second predator moved immediately, not toward Arya, but toward a control panel near the chamber's far exit. It began manipulating the controls with surprising dexterity. Warning klaxons blared as the chamber's temperature regulation system went into emergency shutdown. The temperature began to plummet rapidly. "Override code Alpha 7 Delta," Arya called out. But the system didn't respond. The predator had somehow bypassed the voice recognition protocols. Ice crystals were already forming on the metal surfaces around them. At this rate, the chamber would reach lethal cold within minutes. Lethal for her, at least. The predators, with their advanced biology, might be able to withstand it. The wounded predator had retreated several steps but still blocked her path to the main exit. The second creature continued working at the control panel, occasionally glancing in her direction to monitor her movements. Arya assessed her options. Her Gen 2 modifications included some cold resistance, but nothing that would save her if the chamber reached its minimum possible temperature. She needed to either restore the environmental controls or escape. The wounded predator suddenly collapsed to the floor, resuming its earlier death-feigning posture. This time, Arya wasn't fooled. "That trick won't work twice," she said, advancing cautiously toward the prone figure. As she approached, the creature remained motionless. She circled it warily, noticing that its wound was already coagulating. It possessed accelerated healing capabilities. The second predator had stopped manipulating the controls and was watching her interaction with its companion. Its posture suggested tension, readiness. Arya made a quick decision. She lunged toward the fallen predator, claws aimed at a vital-looking cluster of sensory organs. But at the last moment, she diverted her attack toward the control panel instead. As expected, the playing dead predator exploded into motion, intercepting her before she could reach the controls. Its reflexes were extraordinary, but Arya had anticipated this reaction. She twisted in midair, using the creature's own momentum to throw it against the cooling unit behind her. The impact dazed the predator momentarily, giving Arya precious seconds to reach the panel. The second predator moved to stop her, but it was too far away. Arya's fingers flew over the controls, inputting the emergency restoration sequence. System override. Authorization, Vale Gen 2, 0473. Nothing happened. Your authorizations have been revoked, Cadet Vale. Came a familiar voice from the chamber entrance. Lieutenant Rourke stood in the doorway, flanked by security personnel in environmental suits. He held a control device in his hand, a Predator command module. Step away from the panel. Arya froze, trying to process this development. Sir, these creatures are trying to... I know exactly what they're doing, Rourke cut her off. They're following their programming, to test your capabilities and limitations. Understanding dawned with cold clarity. This was a test? You set this up? Not me, Rourke corrected. GenCore protocol. All Gen 2 units must be evaluated against more advanced models to measure evolutionary success. He gestured toward the predators. Stand down, both of you. Assessment complete. To Arya's amazement, both creatures immediately relaxed their aggressive postures. The one that had been playing dead rose to its feet with fluid grace, no longer pretending vulnerability. You used me, Arya said, anger rising. You put the entire station at risk for a test? The station was never at risk, Rourke replied coldly. The Apex units were under control the entire time. Their apparent autonomy was part of the scenario. But something didn't add up. Arya had seen the communication between the predators, their coordinated strategy. That level of intelligence and cooperation couldn't be faked. The predator nearest to her made a subtle movement, a gesture toward the exit opposite from where Rourke stood. It was so quick that the lieutenant and his security team wouldn't have noticed. But Arya's enhanced perception caught it clearly. A message, an offer. The test is concluded, Rourke continued. Report to medical for evaluation. The data from this encounter will be valuable for future Gen iterations. Arya noticed the predators exchanging glances. If creatures without visible eyes could be said to do such a thing. Their sensory organs pulsed in patterns that suggested silent communication. What happens to them now? She asked, nodding toward the predators. Rourke's expression hardened. That's classified, Cadet. But I can tell you that obsolete models are typically decommissioned to make way for improved versions. Decommissioned, a euphemism for destroyed. These intelligent creatures, capable of complex thought and strategy, would be discarded like failed experiments. Just as she would be, eventually, when Gen 3 or Gen 4 came along. I understand, sir, Arya said, carefully keeping her tone neutral. Permission to escort the specimens to containment? I'd like to observe their behavioral patterns further. Rourke considered for a moment, then nodded. Granted. It's good to see you taking initiative in research protocols. Report to me when they're secure. As the security team parted to let her pass, Arya gestured for the predators to follow. They did so with eerie coordination, moving in perfect tandem. This way, she said, leading them toward the exit she had seen the predator indicate earlier. The corridor beyond the cooling chamber led to a junction with multiple branching paths. Security cameras monitored the main routes, but Arya knew the station's layout included maintenance tunnels with minimal surveillance. Perfect for what she was considering. What she was considering was madness, treason, by military standards. But after what she had just learned, she couldn't ignore the truth. She and these predators were the same in Gencor's eyes, tools to be used and discarded. At the junction, she hesitated just long enough to disable her location tracker with a quick movement that the cameras wouldn't catch. Then she turned toward the maintenance access hatch. "We're taking a detour," she told the predators, unsure if they fully understood her words, but confident they would follow her lead. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, designed for service drones rather than human passage. They moved in silence for several minutes, putting distance between themselves and Rourke's security team. Finally, Arya stopped and faced the creatures. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I think we want the same thing, freedom from Gencor. Am I right?" The lead predator, the one that had played dead, made a series of clicking sounds, then deliberately nodded its head in a very human gesture of affirmation. "You can understand me," Arya breathed. "How is that possible?" The predator reached toward her slowly, extending a limb that reformed into something resembling a hand. It pointed to her, then to itself, then made a circular motion encompassing them both. "We're the same?" Arya guessed. "Similar enough to communicate?" Another nod. "What were you really after in the genetics lab?" The second predator stepped forward, using a claw to scratch a symbol on the tunnel wall, the same DNA helix from before, but this time with a line struck through it. "You want to destroy your genetic programming," Arya realized, "to be free of control." Both predators nodded in unison. Arya made her decision. "I'll help you, but in return, I need your help to escape this station. There's a supply shuttle docking in 6 hours. That's our best chance." The predators communicated silently between themselves, sensory organs pulsing in complex patterns. Then, as one, they turned back to her and made gestures of agreement. An alliance was formed, the hunted banding together against those who would make them nothing more than weapons. "First, we need to get to the genetics lab without being detected," Arya said, thinking aloud. "The main corridors will be too heavily monitored now that you've been escaped test subjects." The lead predator made a series of gestures, pointing to the ventilation system access panel nearby. "The ventilation system?" Arya nodded. "Good thinking, but we'll need to disable the motion sensors." She accessed a maintenance terminal on the wall, using her cadet credentials to log into the system. Her access was limited, but she could view the station schematics and security protocols. "My codes won't get us far," she muttered. "We need higher clearance to disable the sensors." The second predator moved to the terminal, studying the display. Then, to Arya's astonishment, it extended an appendage that reshaped itself to interface directly with the system. Within seconds, the security display changed, showing all sensors in the ventilation system switching to maintenance mode. "How did you—" Arya began, then stopped herself. "Right. Advanced bioweapon. I'm guessing they built you with some tech integration capabilities." The predator made a sound that might almost have been a chuckle. With the sensors disabled, they proceeded into the ventilation system, a tight fit for beings their size, but navigable. Arya led the way, following the schematics she had memorized during her station orientation. As they crawled through the metal passages, Arya's mind raced with questions. These creatures were far more advanced than anything she had been told about. Their intelligence, their ability to strategize and communicate, it went beyond military utility into something approaching personhood. And if Gencor was willing to decommission them, despite their obvious sentience, what did that say about how the corporation viewed all its creations, including her? After 20 minutes of careful navigation, they reached the access point above the genetics laboratory. Arya peered through the grate, surveying the room below. Two researchers worked at separate stations, engrossed in their data. "We need a distraction," she whispered. The lead predator made a soft clicking sound, then pointed to an environmental control panel visible on the far wall of the lab. Arya nodded in understanding. Can you trigger an alarm without causing actual damage? The Predator extended a limb through the grate, its appendage elongating and thinning until it could reach the panel without being noticed. With delicate precision, it manipulated something inside the control housing. Seconds later, warning lights began flashing as the lab's atmospheric pressure readings spiked to dangerous levels on the monitors. The researchers looked up in alarm. "Pressure anomaly detected," announced the station AI. "All personnel evacuate genetics laboratory immediately. Sealing in 30 seconds." The researchers quickly saved their work and hurried from the room, heading for the safety of the corridor. As soon as they were gone, Arya pushed open the grate and dropped into the lab, followed by the Predators. "We have about 2 minutes before they override the false alarm," she said, moving quickly to the central console. "What exactly are we looking for?" The Predators moved with purpose toward a secure storage unit at the rear of the lab. The lead creature interfaced with the locking mechanism, causing it to disengage with a soft click. Inside the unit were rows of labeled vials containing luminescent fluids of varying colors. The Predator selected one filled with amber liquid, holding it up for Arya to see. "What is it?" she asked. The Predator made a series of gestures, pointing to the vial, then to itself and its companion, then making a braking motion. "It's the control serum," Arya realized. "The chemical leash that keeps you obedient to your handlers?" The Predator nodded, then pointed to a nearby medical injector. "You want to neutralize it now? We don't have much time." Another nod, more urgent this time. Arya hesitated. Once this line was crossed, there would be no going back. She would be aiding in what GenCorps would consider sabotage of military assets, a capital offense. But looking at these intelligent beings, trapped in bodies designed as weapons and bound to the will of others, she saw her own future. What was being done to them would eventually be done to her when a newer, better model came along. "Do it," she decided, but quickly. She loaded the vial into the injector and handed it to the lead Predator. Without hesitation, it applied the device to a port-like opening in its exoskeleton. The amber fluid drained from the vial as the Predator's body absorbed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature's sensory organs began pulsing rapidly, and it made a sound Arya hadn't heard before, a low, resonant tone that seemed to express relief or satisfaction. The second Predator took the injector, loaded another vial, and repeated the process. Its reaction was similar, a visible relaxation followed by more confident posture. "Did it work?" Arya asked. The lead Predator extended a limb toward her, slowly opening what passed for a hand. In its palm lay a small device, a tracker, identical to the one embedded in Arya's own forearm. It had removed its tracker. The control serum must have contained nanites that maintained the tracking and control systems within their bodies. "Impressive," Arya murmured. "But we need to move. Security will be here any—" The lab door slid open, revealing Dr. Marin Holt. The geneticist froze at the sight before her. A cadet and 2 apex predators standing amidst open secure storage units. For a tense moment, no one moved. Arya's claws extended reflexively, and the predators shifted into defensive postures. But instead of raising the alarm, Dr. Holt quickly stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "I've been waiting for this," she said quietly, "wondering which of you would be the first to seek freedom." Arya stared in confusion. "Dr. Holt? You knew about this?" "I designed them," the scientist replied, gesturing to the predators. "Not as weapons, originally. They were meant to be adaptable exploration units for extreme environments. Intelligent, autonomous beings that could help us understand worlds too hostile for human presence." She moved closer, studying the predators with what looked like pride, mixed with regret. But GenCorps saw only their potential as weapons. They took my research and perverted it, adding aggression triggers and control mechanisms. She turned to Arya. "Just as they did with the Gen program. You were meant to be ambassadors, humans enhanced to survive on colony worlds. Instead, They turned you into soldiers. The lead predator made a series of clicking sounds directed at Dr. Holt. To Arya's surprise, the scientist responded with similar sounds. You speak their language, Arya asked, astonished. I created it, Dr. Holt replied. A simplified form of communication based on sound patterns they could produce with their modified vocal structures. It was part of ensuring their intelligence could be expressed. She turned back to Arya. They've been planning this escape for months. They chose you to help them because you share something with them. You're both victims of Gencor's militarization. The blood, Arya realized. When it sniffed my blood, it recognized something familiar. Dr. Holt nodded. Your Gen 2 modifications include genetic markers similar to components I used in their design. In a very real sense, you're distant cousins. The station's PA system crackled to life. Security alert. Unauthorized access to genetics laboratory detected. All security personnel report to Level 3 immediately. They've discovered the override, Dr. Holt said urgently. You need to go, now. Come with us, Arya offered. The scientist shook her head. I can't, but I can give you time. She moved to a computer terminal and began typing rapidly. I'm creating a false trail in the security system. It will show you heading toward the hangar bay on Level 5. We're actually going to the supply dock on Level 2, Arya said. There's a shuttle arriving in 5 hours. Good plan. Take this. Dr. Holt removed a data chip from around her neck and handed it to Arya. It contains everything. The truth about Gencor's programs, including Gen and Apex. Find a way to get it to the Colonial Oversight Committee. The predators made sounds that seemed to express gratitude or farewell to Dr. Holt. She responded in kind, then pointed to a service hatch in the corner of the lab. That leads to the cargo transport system. Follow it to Junction C7, then take the maintenance ladder down to Level 2. The security cameras in that sector are on a loop from a system test I scheduled yesterday. Arya hesitated. They'll know you helped us. I've been planning my own exit strategy for some time, Dr. Holt assured her. Don't worry about me. Just make sure that data reaches the right people. With a final nod of gratitude, Arya led the predators toward the service hatch. As they disappeared into the passage beyond, Dr. Holt returned to her terminal, fingers flying over the keys as she worked to cover their escape. The cargo transport system was a network of conveyor belts and pneumatic tubes designed to move supplies throughout the station. Arya and the predators moved cautiously along the narrow maintenance walkways that paralleled the main conveyors, careful to avoid the automated cargo drones that occasionally passed. Junction C7 should be just ahead, Arya whispered, though she doubted anyone could hear them over the mechanical noise of the transport system. The lead predator suddenly froze, its sensory organs pulsing in what Arya had come to recognize as an alert pattern. It pointed toward a security camera mounted on the ceiling nearby, a camera that was actively tracking their movement. Dr. Holt said the cameras would be on a loop, Arya muttered. Something's wrong. As if in confirmation, the station's PA system activated. Attention all personnel. Rogue assets detected in cargo sector. Security protocols elevated to Level 1. Authorized weapons free. The second predator made a series of urgent clicking sounds, pointing toward a junction ahead, where the conveyor split into multiple directions. You're right, Arya agreed. We need to split up. It's our best chance. The predators communicated briefly between themselves. Then the lead one turned to Arya and made a series of gestures, pointing to her, then to itself, then downward, followed by pointing to its companion and indicating a different direction. You and I go down to Level 2 as planned. Arya interpreted. Your friend creates a diversion elsewhere. She considered for a moment. It's risky. If they catch any of us alone... The second predator made a sound that somehow conveyed determination, then reached out to touch Arya's shoulder briefly, before turning to head down a different passage. Good luck, Arya called after it softly. Then, to the remaining predator, Let's move. They found the maintenance ladder Dr. Holt had mentioned and descended to level 2. The cargo receiving area was bustling with activity as personnel prepared for the incoming supply shuttle. They would need to blend in somehow. No small challenge with a 7-foot alien creature in tow. "The shuttle docks at Bay 3, Arya whispered, peering around a corner at the busy loading area. "But there's no way we can just walk across the floor without being seen." The Predator studied the situation, then pointed toward a line of cargo containers waiting to be loaded. Some were large enough to conceal even its substantial frame. "Good idea," Arya agreed. "But timing will be crucial. We need a container that's already been checked and sealed, but won't be loaded until the shuttle arrives." They watched the loading procedures from their hiding place, noting the systematic way the cargo was processed. Each container was scanned, sealed with a security tag, then moved to a staging area to await loading. "There." Arya pointed to a large container marked with priority tags. "That one's going on first according to the manifest display. If we can get inside before the final check." The Predator made a clicking sound of agreement. They waited for a lull in activity, then moved swiftly from their hiding place toward the target container. Arya reached it first, quickly overriding the electronic lock with her security codes, which might still work if Rourke hadn't thought to revoke her basic access yet. The lock disengaged with a soft beep. Arya pulled the door open just enough for them to slip inside, then sealed it behind them. The container was filled with medical supplies, packages of synthetic blood, organ cultivation matrices, and other biological materials. Ironically, perfect camouflage for 2 genetically modified beings. "Now we wait," Arya whispered. "The shuttle should dock in about 4 hours. Once we're aboard, we can hide until it reaches Central Hub Station. From there, we can find transport to the outer colonies." The Predator settled into a space between crates, its form seeming to adjust and compact to fit the available space. Arya was once again reminded of how advanced its biology was, adaptable in ways her own Gen 2 modifications couldn't match. "I still don't understand why you chose me," she said after a while. "There must have been easier ways to escape." The Predator was silent for a moment, then slowly extended a limb toward her. At the end of the appendage, its tissue reconfigured to form what looked like a small display screen composed of bioluminescent cells. On this living screen, symbols appeared, not random patterns but deliberate communication. "You can write?" Arya gasped. New symbols formed on the display. Not well, limited vocabulary. "But enough to communicate," Arya marveled. "Why didn't you do this earlier?" "Energy cost high, save for important." Arya nodded in understanding. "And my question? Why me?" The living display flickered, then formed new words. "You like us. Modified but still self, not just weapon." The profound simplicity of this statement struck Arya deeply. Despite their radical differences in appearance and origin, they shared a fundamental reality. They had been altered by others, but still maintained their essential selves, their personhood. "You're right," she agreed softly. "We're not just weapons." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the container being moved. The loading had begun earlier than expected. "Stay still," Arya whispered, though the instruction was hardly necessary. The Predator had already gone completely motionless, its bioluminescence dimming to near invisibility. They felt the container being lifted by a loading mechanism. Then the brief sensation of movement before it was set down again, presumably inside the shuttle's cargo hold. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then came the sounds they had been dreading, voices just outside the container. "This one's priority medical. Check it again before sealing the hold," came a gruff voice. "Already checked it processing," replied another. "New orders from Lieutenant Rourke. All containers get rescanned before departure, especially the medical supplies." Arya's heart sank. Rourke had anticipated their escape route. The container's lock beeped as someone entered the override code. Arya tensed, ready to fight their way out if necessary. The Predator shifted slightly, moving into a position from which it could strike. The door began to open, letting in a shaft of light from the cargo bay. A security officer peered inside, scanner in hand. Before either Arya or the Predator could react, an alarm blared throughout the station. "Security breach in Sector 4, announced the PA system. "Unknown entity attacking primary life support systems. All personnel report to emergency stations." The security officer cursed, closing the container door. "Finish the scan later," he called to his companion. "We're needed in Sector 4. The sound of running footsteps faded as the security team rushed to respond to the new threat. The other Predator, Arya realized. "It's creating the diversion we needed." Her companion made a sound that might have been concern or acknowledgement. The next hour passed in anxious silence as they felt the shuttle complete its loading procedures and eventually disengage from the station. The slight shift in gravity told them when the craft had moved beyond the station's artificial gravitational field and switched to its own systems. Only, when the gentle vibration of the engines settled into the steady rhythm of cruise velocity, did Arya dare to speak again. "We made it off the station," she said. "But your friend?" The Predator's living display activated again. Sacrifice accepted. Freedom worth cost. Arya felt a pang of guilt. "We don't know for certain it was caught. It might have found another way off the station." The Predator didn't respond, but its sensory organs pulsed in a pattern that somehow conveyed doubt. "Either way," Arya continued, "we need to honor its choice by completing our mission, getting this data to the Colonial Oversight Committee and exposing what GenCorps has been doing." She fingered the data chip Dr. Holt had given her. So much risk, so much sacrifice, all to reveal the truth. The Predator's display flickered to life again. Then what? A simple question with no simple answer. Arya had never considered a future beyond her service to GenCorps. Where does a genetically modified super soldier go when she's no longer a soldier? "I don't know," she admitted. "Find somewhere we can live without being weapons, I suppose. The outer colonies have less GenCorps influence. Some might even welcome our abilities if we use them to help, rather than harm." The Predator seemed to consider this, its sensory organs pulsing thoughtfully. Then new words formed on its display. "Together?" Arya smiled, her first genuine smile since this ordeal began. "Yes, together. We're distant cousins, remember? And now we're the only family either of us has." The living display glowed briefly brighter, then displayed a final message before dimming to conserve energy. Acceptable outcome. As the shuttle carried them toward Central Hub Station and an uncertain future, Arya reflected on the strange alliance she had formed. She had been created to hunt creatures like the Predator beside her. Yet here they were, fugitives united by a common desire for self-determination. The journey ahead would be dangerous. GenCorps would not easily surrender its assets, and the political fallout from exposing their illegal genetic research would be considerable. But for the first time since her genetic modification, Arya felt something like hope. They were more than the weapons they had been designed to be, and perhaps, together, they could find a way to be whatever they chose instead. Hours later, as the shuttle approached Central Hub Station, Arya gently roused the Predator from its energy-conserving dormant state. "We're almost there," she whispered. "Once we dock, we'll need to move quickly through the cargo processing area. Hub Station is civilian-controlled, but GenCorps will have representatives watching for us." The Predator's sensory organs pulsed in acknowledgement. "You'll need to change your appearance," Arya continued. "Something less predatory. Can you do that?" In response, the creature's exoskeleton began to shift and flow like liquid metal. Its towering form contracted and reshaped until it resembled a bulky humanoid figure in environmental protective gear. Still unusual, but not immediately identifiable as an apex predator. "Impressive," Arya murmured. "I didn't know you could do that." The living display formed briefly. Limited time. Energy cost high. Understood. We'll move fast. They felt the shuttle dock with a slight shudder. Soon, the cargo would be unloaded. They needed to be ready to slip away in the confusion of a busy spaceport. Arya checked her own appearance. Her cadet uniform would attract attention. Using a surgical blade from the medical supplies, she cut away all identifying insignia and rank markers, transforming the uniform into nondescript work clothes. "Remember," she told her companion, "if we get separated, head for the civilian transport terminal. Look for ships bound for the outer colonies, specifically Proxima Centauri Station. It's far enough from Earth to be outside GenCor's immediate reach." The Predator's makeshift humanoid head nodded in understanding. They felt the container being moved again as the unloading process began. Arya pressed her ear to the wall, listening for the right moment, when the container would be placed in the station's cargo processing area, but before it would be opened for inspection. The movement stopped. Voices outside indicated they had reached the processing area. "Now," Arya whispered, carefully disengaging the interior lock mechanism. They slipped out of the container and quickly moved behind a stack of crates. The cargo bay was bustling with activity. Dock workers, automated loaders, and security personnel all focused on efficiently processing the newly arrived supplies. Arya spotted their exit route, a service corridor used by maintenance staff. "This way," she murmured, leading the disguised Predator through the maze of cargo. They had almost reached the corridor when a security officer looked directly at them. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You there! Identify yourselves!" he called, hand moving toward his sidearm. Arya thought quickly. "Environmental systems check," she replied, gesturing to her companion's disguise. "Possible radiation leak in the shuttle's coolant system." The officer frowned. "I wasn't notified of any radiation protocols. Just initiated," Arya said smoothly. "We need to secure the area. You should probably move your personnel back 50 meters as a precaution." Concern replaced suspicion on the officer's face. "Right. I'll set up a perimeter." As he turned to organize his team, Arya and the Predator slipped into the service corridor and hurried away from the cargo bay. The corridor led them into the station's main concourse, a vast, multi-level public space filled with travelers, merchants, and the controlled chaos of a major transport hub. Here, they could blend with the crowd. "We need to find transport to Proxima Centauri," Arya said, scanning the departure boards. "There, Bay 17, a mining supply ship leaving in 40 minutes. They moved through the concourse, careful to avoid security cameras and patrol officers. The Predator's disguise was holding, but Arya could tell it was straining to maintain the form, its movements becoming slightly less fluid, its humanoid shape occasionally rippling with the effort of containment. "Not much longer," she assured it. "Once we're aboard the mining ship, you can rest." As they approached the departure gate for Bay 17, Arya noticed 2 GenCor security officers checking IDs. They must have been alerted already. The station's security system would have flagged her missing status by now. "Change of plan," she whispered. "We can't go through the main gate." The Predator's living display briefly formed beneath its disguise. Alternative? Arya scanned their surroundings, noting the maintenance access points, ventilation shafts, and service robots moving throughout the concourse. "There," she decided, pointing discreetly to a waste disposal unit being loaded by automated systems. "Those units go directly to the ship's recycling intake. If we can get inside one." The Predator made a sound that might have been resigned agreement. They circled around to approach the waste disposal unit from behind, using the crowd as cover. The automated loader had just finished filling one container and was moving to the next in line. Arya checked to ensure no one was watching, then quickly opened the container's access panel. "In," she urged. The Predator squeezed its disguised form into the container, followed by Arya. She pulled the panel closed just as the loader returned to collect it. The container was lifted and moved through a series of automated processing stations, through a small viewport. Arya could see they were being transferred directly to the mining ship, as she had hoped. Finally, the container was deposited in the ship's waste processing chamber, a large, industrial space filled with sorting machinery and recycling systems. "We made it," Arya breathed, pushing open the access panel and helping the Predator out. Once free of the confined space, the creature released its humanoid disguise with what seemed like relief, returning to its natural form, though with slightly dulled coloration, a sign of energy depletion. "Rest," Arya told it. "I'll find us somewhere safer to hide for the journey." The ship's waste processing chamber connected to a network of maintenance corridors that ran throughout the vessel. Arya explored cautiously, identifying a small storage compartment near the secondary life support systems that would serve their needs, isolated, rarely accessed, and with environmental controls they could adjust for comfort. When she returned to guide the Predator to their hiding place, she found it examining something it had discovered in the waste chamber, a damaged data tablet discarded by a previous passenger. "Good find," she said. "If we can repair it, we might be able to access the ship's systems, or at least get news from the station." The Predator handed her the tablet, then followed her through the maintenance corridors to their new hiding place. Once inside the storage compartment, Arya sealed the door and adjusted the environmental controls to provide warmer temperatures and higher oxygen levels, conditions that seemed to revitalize her companion. Using tools from a nearby maintenance kit, Arya worked on the damaged tablet, while the Predator entered a restorative state, similar to sleep. Its exoskeleton pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, cycling through patterns that suggested internal healing and energy regeneration. After an hour of careful work, the tablet flickered to life. Its systems were limited, but it could still access the ship's information network and, more importantly, receive station news broadcasts. The headlines confirmed what Arya had feared. GenCore assets missing. Military lockdown at Central Hub. The report mentioned dangerous prototype weapons and a rogue enhanced soldier, with warnings to report any sightings immediately. But there was other news as well. A small item buried beneath the main headlines. Whistleblower exposes GenCore ethical violations. The article was vague, mentioning only that evidence had been transmitted to colonial oversight authorities regarding questionable research practices. Dr. Holt, Arya realized. She must have released her own copies of the data. The Predator had awakened and moved to read the screen over her shoulder. Its sensory organs pulsed with what seemed like satisfaction. "This changes things," Arya said thoughtfully. "With the evidence already public, delivering this data chip becomes less critical. More important now is that we survive as living proof of what GenCore has done." The living display formed on the Predator's limb. Destination. Same? Yes. Proxima Centauri is still our best option. It's far enough from Earth to give us time. And the colonial government there has been pushing for independence from corporate influence. They might be sympathetic to our situation. The Predator seemed to consider this, then formed new words. "Others like us." Arya hadn't considered this possibility. "You think there might be more? Other Apex units or Gen soldiers who escaped?" The display pulsed. Probability high, not first attempt. "You're right," Arya agreed. "We can't be the first to try. And if Dr. Holt helped us, she might have helped others." She tapped thoughtfully on the tablet. "If that's true, we should try to find them. Strength in numbers, and all that." The Predator's sensory organs pulsed in what Arya had come to recognize as its version of a smile. As the mining ship accelerated toward the jump point that would take them to the Proxima Centauri system, Arya felt an unfamiliar emotion taking root alongside her caution and determination, a sense of possibility. They were fugitives, yes. Hunted, certainly. But for the first time, they were also free. Free to define themselves beyond the limitations of their creation. Free to choose allies and enemies based on their own judgment, rather than programmed imperatives. The predator settled beside her, its massive form somehow conveying comfort rather than menace. Its living display formed one last message before dimming. Not predator, not prey, something new. Arya smiled, reaching out to touch its exoskeleton gently. Something new, she agreed. For both of us. The stars streaked past the small viewport of their hiding place as the ship prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Somewhere ahead lay an uncertain future, but one they would face together. No longer playing dead to avoid the combat they had been created for, but fully alive and determined to forge their own path among the stars.